Welcome to the JMARK Business Innovation Technology Experience.
Okay, welcome everybody that is joining us. If you are joining us live, then you may know that last week we held the Communication and Collaboration Symposium, our first virtual event, which was very, very successful and well received. And today we have one of our customer relationship managers, John Harmon, with us. And we are going to talk about just the highlights and recaps from the event for those that were not able to attend, because there were obviously some really important things that we talked about, and that in this time and age with everything going on with COVID and chaos and craziness in the world is important and relevant to business. So to start us off, John, from an observer in this, someone that didn't take part in all of the planning and preparation like we did, can you give us kind of the outside perspective of, what your experience was and kind of some of the highlights that were impressed upon you?
Certainly. So some of the highlights I took away from it around the telecommunications piece that Jeremy spoke about, and he shared a story of a client that he worked with and being able to work with them on putting in phones and upgrading their internet, also saving them some money. We talk a lot about the importance of internet with people moving to web-based applications or either cloud-hosted environments, the need for reliable and speed. From that, we talked about the workplace application. I feel like that's kind of been our little kept secret here at JMARK. And so maybe seeing it shared for the first time to a wider audience, it was pretty cool to see all the reactions there.
That's great to hear. There were, when you're planning these things and you're trying to figure out, what exactly is it that people wanna learn about. We kind of looked at ourselves and looked at, what are the struggles that we've had, what are the struggles that we've been dealing with during this change and this time of changing, and it rang true with so many people. And for me, it's a little bit harder for me to talk about takeaways, just because I was so close to everything, and same with Dax and Christina. But it was great to see the reaction to people to the tools and some of the strategies that we talked about, because these are things that have helped us to quickly, rapidly adapt to changes in the marketplace, and to see people's reaction to this and see that, oh wow, it's like I didn't even know that was out there. Is pretty cool. And the little pieces from Jeremy about the cost savings in internet circuits and things that people don't even think about very often, to the Connexus, which is a new product that we've put together, a bundle of products that we've put together, which fills an exact need of something that's needed in the marketplace, and then on to workplace. So I think it was really cool to see everything kind of come out, and be able to share these things with everybody else who's also struggling with these things.
Yeah, I think one of my big takeaways, Todd, is you said you were close to it. You were so close that you gave a presentation, and your presentation, the title was Increasing Velocity and Creating Success. And one of my big takeaways was hearing Jeremy tell those stories about people who had done that through telecom, hearing the individual stories of, we had a Q&A with some other companies that are using Workplace from Facebook to really bring their culture together, and how it's helped them specifically this year with their workforce distributed, but how it's also helped them, the companies that are using it in the past to bring their culture together in ways. And that's a big takeaway for me is these individual pieces that we talked about at the different points in the symposium, how each of them is maybe a small thing and maybe something that people sort of overlook, the way that having a better communication system really does help you create success. That you go out and you get these pieces to bring your pieces together, and you can actively make that happen. You don't just have to sort of be resigned to, our workforce is distributed, it's going to be hard to get things done now. And instead, you can go out and look, and there are solutions that create success. And I mean, I love that phrase, increased velocity.
Yeah, I wanted to point out some stats that Todd had in his presentation. Pretty crazy. 99% of remote workers would like to continue doing so, at least to some extent. And then 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working remotely from home by the end of 2021. So this stuff is very relevant, very important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people hear that, you may hear that 99% and just, yeah, it's like, no way, that's full of it. My people aren't like that. And whether you accept that number or not, it doesn't matter. The truth, though, is that in all these reports since the beginning of COVID, they have, in every independent study, they have all gone up independently from February to now. And it's a big adaptation that companies are going to have to make. And, it's just reality. People, for the most part, are enjoying working from home. They're enjoying the productivity that they can gain. They're enjoying not having to spend time in commutes and dressing down and not having to iron shirts and I don't know what else. but yeah, definitely big changes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually looking at some stats yesterday, and I should have thought about it quicker and pulled it up, but it was talking about someone had done a survey this year, and it was earlier this year, where people were frustrated with communicating and most especially, actually, it was specifically about collaborating in a remote environment. And that I think that's the huge takeaway for me, is that I've never felt that since I'm remote. Regular listeners of this podcast will know I'm remote. I live in Utah. JMARK is in Missouri. So I am remote all the time. But even more so, I think other people from JMARK, Christina and maybe John, you guys can speak to this, but I haven't felt that frustration with collaboration, because we've had these tools in place the entire time that we have all been at home. And so it was a much smoother transition. We already had placed a premium on making sure that people can work together no matter where they're at. And I think that's so important, that this communication and collaboration can happen almost seamlessly if you find the right tools and take the time. And I think that's what's important, is take the time to look at the tools that are available, look at your needs, and talk with an MSP, talk with your technology provider, and figure out what you need and how to put those in place, so that because they really do make a difference. And if you get the right one in place, it's a game changer.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but just the rapidness at which we as a company changed to being so disparate and working apart was, it was essentially an email. It was like, okay, tomorrow go home. and everything, there may be a few hiccups here and there, but overall it was pretty successful. But then again, we are a technology company, and we use technology as a forward-thinking strategy to solve a lot of our problems. And so we've made those changes. And so, John, what you work with clients a lot. Have you seen some of these changes and adapting to digital transformation and working from home? What's the word that you hear with companies you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a shift. Even the clients that I work with that are back in the office or have been for some time are still using more of the tools they have available for virtual meetings, less travel time. They're just more efficient with these tools. And I think that we're going to see that continue, even as, everything that's going on right now, as it normalizes, we hope, and you can have more in-person meetings. I think that there's a more efficient way to do things with the tools that are available.
The other thing that I think is important to mention, because it goes into everything else that happened in the symposium, is how much companies are adapting in terms of digital transformation to everything that's happening in the world. Banks are making changes to automated teller machines. Schools and education are going, for the most part, online, distance learning. You have the shipping industry that has just exploded. Online shopping has just exploded. One of the things I shared in the presentation was that we've gone through 6 months or 6 years of digital transformation a decade of digital transformation in the last 6 months. And so it's that change that companies are having to adapt, not just for their internal workforce, but adapt to the changes in customer behaviors. And what are some of those? Are you seeing some of those kind of product changes, service changes, and customers actually changing to meet the changing needs of their customers?
Hospitality, and I work with healthcare. I work with law firms and CPAs. There's not one industry that this shift is for. It's across the board, and so each industry might have unique things to them that they need to shift with. But a lot of the not challenges, but the necessary changes apply to everyone.
Yeah, one of the things that, and John, you already touched on this a little bit, but I think it was eye-opening to me to listen to Jeremy talk about internet and internet circuits and phone systems, and those things what you touched on, John, is that people sort of dismiss those things a little bit because they're so common. Jeremy talked about the fact that the people don't necessarily want to think about it because it's not exciting, but that is such an important fundamental thing to the foundation of this technology success, that it helps you adapt to these things, whether you're bringing people back into the office, like you mentioned, John, that the people are doing, or whether they're distributed. This is how you communicate. This is how you set the foundation so that you can start adapting these other tools that companies are starting to release. And it's easy to overlook, but it's such an important change for people to look at, and such an easy thing to do. That's one thing Jeremy pointed out, that you talk to your technology provider, a telecom provider, somebody like JMARK, that can go out and we can help you find the answers, help you find the best telecom situation for your company based on your needs, based on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and whether you have a blend of remote workers or mostly in-office workers, a lot of your workforce is going to be accessing the same line of business applications via the web. And so it's not just your work internet, it's your home internet too. But the story that Jeremy shared, I'm familiar with. It's a client that I work with, and they were able to put in a new phone system. They were able to increase their internet and save money each month. And those savings they were able to reallocate to other projects specifically for IT. That's just that company. Any company would sign up for that. I mean, that's a home run. Boost your performance and save money. You can do a lot of things with those savings. So yeah, it's a great piece from JMARK, the telecommunications team, and they can do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, I think it's worth highlighting that case study that Jeremy mentioned for those that are listening. What John's talking about is a case study where we had a client that had a 50 meg circuit We upgraded them to a 100 meg circuit. They had an aging 8-year-old phone system that was needing to be replaced, and we replaced it with a hosted phone system, UCAS provider, and essentially gave them more features, more adaptability for their organization, increased their internet, and did it with a savings of over $400 a month, and not having to put out a hefty $20,000 upgrade to the phone system. And a lot of people, like you said, phone systems just, and it's kind of the same as technology in some ways. It's not sexy, it's the phone. You just pick it up and you talk to people, but that's not phones anymore. It's not really phones, it's communications. And with current communications platforms, you can have meetings, you can do video calls, you can talk on your business telephone, on your telephone line, on your cell phone. You can get messages on your cell phone from your business telephone line. You make calls on your cell phone to your business telephone line. There's just so many different capabilities, and a lot of people, I think, are stuck in this mindset of it's a phone, it works, why do I need to change it? But that's the reality. Is the world is changing, and it's those type of tactics and strategies and tools that allow companies to quickly adapt. Because at the beginning of COVID, I can't even count the number of times I spoke with Robert, one of our account reps, and he was constantly calling people that they would have a message on their phone system that just said, sorry, we don't have the ability to take phone calls. We'll come in once a day to collect messages and blah, blah, blah. And nothing's being forwarded. Nothing's going, people aren't being informed of people calling in. I mean, that's chaotic. If you can't get the communications from your customers, that's crazy. And so it's a changing world, and I think that's what was so good about Jeremy's presentation, just to hear the savings that can actually happen when companies are truly trying to figure out how to be distributed and do it without increased expense. That is definitely one thing that is a huge.
Yeah, I wanted to share another quick anecdote, which so Todd, you mentioned Rob, who actually, after the symposium was over, was talking to a client, and that client or not a client, a prospect of someone who was talking to him about a better phone system. And Jeremy had mentioned in his presentation about the ability to, switch from having a conversation online, on the phone, and switching over just seamlessly to the cell phone app and continuing the conversation. And this person said, that is amazing. That's exactly what I need. If I had had that yesterday, I could have continued a conversation I was having at the end of the day and driven to my kid's football game, and I wouldn't have missed that. And it's small things like that you don't even know what technology sometimes, how it has changed and what's possible until you talk to a technology provider and explore some of these options that you might not even be keeping track of, that are changing the game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of business owners might be hesitant because they just hear like money, very expensive, don't have time for that, or the resources. But again, this case study, it's incredible. They got this way better situation and saved money. So it's worth at least looking into.
Yeah, and the other thing that Jeremy mentioned that he didn't spend a lot of time on, though, is something that is even less sexy, and that's internet bandwidth. And for those that aren't familiar with the telecom industry, I mean, there's a gazillion internet providers that just piggyback on top of each other, and it's crazy. And a lot of times you will buy a service from one provider and they're just piggybacking on another provider, and that's piggybacking on another provider, that's piggybacking on another one. And what we do is we go in and take your bills and look at your providers and figure out what has changed, because technology in all areas is changing at an astronomical pace. And even with internet circuits, in that case study, we went from a 50 to 100 meg and saved them a bunch of money. There's things like that we can do that don't take any energy, any time from you. It's just us looking at the data and looking at our resources of all the different companies we work with and our understanding of how it all works to go, this is a better solution for you, and it'll save you money or get you more bandwidth, or both.
Yeah, and in the end, it all ties back to business continuity, and it's an investment into your business to create efficiencies and consistency, to keep churning the revenue, and the important line of business applications and the things that you work with every day, being able to utilize those so you can process orders, so you can get billing out, all that important stuff to your business is all, it all comes back to this.
Very true. So let's move on to recapping some of the insights from Gary's presentation, Gary Adams. He talked about just this idea of making connections, and kind of started out with the conference call Bingo, with we've many of us have seen and kind of laughed at, and the many Zoom calls and other remote calls we've all been a part of, and kind of went into what are some of your guys' takeaways on Gary's presentation and the Connexus product.
I love it. So for those who, again, weren't there, maybe don't know, Connexus is a full product we're offering for conference rooms. And it can be adapted to different size conference rooms. And it's, the cameras, the monitors, the microphones, everything you need to do this video conferencing. And the key component of it is to finally help solve this problem of having these hybrid meetings where you've got some people in the conference room, some people coming in through video, and it's such a hard problem to fix because there's always somebody who can't hear, somebody who can't see. And again, as somebody who works remote full time, I've absolutely been on the bad end of those conference calls, and it's really frustrating. And so when I first heard about this Connexus product, I was excited. I was excited because I thought, finally, I'm going to be able to hear and understand and see everything that's happening when I'm remote and other people are in a conference room, and it's amazing. And we're talking, again, any size from a conference room, which it can be hard, even if there's only 2 people in a small conference room sometimes. And it's so great to be able to be a part of where you're actually a part of the conversation and a part of the meeting, even if you're not in the room with people. And it makes such a huge difference in the tone of those meetings.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that there is a very clear understanding of the frustration and how valid this is, because I'm full-time remote also, and when we went on the marketing team, we've almost, other than Michelle and Christina sharing an office, we're pretty much all in different states, and our meetings have always been remote, but they're essentially 100% remote. We've had great communication. We see each other's faces. We know when someone else is talking. When you are in a conference room with 10 people and you're one of a few people that's remote, it is maddening to the nth degree. There is internet issues possibly where you're talking and they haven't finished talking, or you think they finished talking and you start talking, and then they think you're interrupting them and you're not interrupting them. And there's people, will turn one way and then the remote people can't hear them, or they'll look at somebody in the face and the remote people can't hear them. And these are all just human behavior. It's not that people are intentionally doing anything wrong, but this system, Connexus, just kills all of that. I mean, it makes it all efficient, all organized. Everybody can hear each other. There's multiple microphones. It's agnostic, so it works with Zoom or WebEx or whatever your flavor of remote communications is nowadays. And when we were using this on the exec team, I mean, it was like, woohoo! I mean, it was awesome. Just when we were testing it out, because all of a sudden I could now hear everything that was happening in the room. Wasn't accidentally talking over people. And I mean, as we move into this environment of a hybrid world where there are still going to be some people in the office and there'll be some people at home, this kind of system is just, I mean, it's a godsend.
Yeah, the piece about it being agnostic, I mean, that's huge. We've all learned in moving to a work from home environment for an extended period of time. There's so many flavors of video conferencing solutions, and whether it's within our organization or with different clients that we work with, everyone has a favorite, it seems like, and so being able to work with all of those is so that's great. I mean, I'm really excited for this piece.
And I think the other aspect of this too is that it's not going to be just for your own internal meetings, because more and more we're moving into a world where your market is the region for your market is as big as you want to make it. And you can have clients anywhere. And this helps that problem, because you can have these meetings with these clients, and as frustrating as these meetings are, where there's what's that?
Or employees anywhere.
Yeah, very true. But as frustrating as these meetings are when it's employees, when it's one internal team, that frustration just skyrockets if it's a client that's on the video end of that, and you're trying to have this meeting with somebody, whether maybe it's a presentation and you're trying to, that's a prospect, and you're having communication issues, that can just flatline your chances of getting that account if there are meeting troubles. And it might not be anything what you're presenting, it might just be the communication issues. And this helps solve that. But it's the same thing, even if it's a long-term client, you can, it's so nice to just be able to speak to them and know that everybody can hear each other and be heard.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of the things Gary touched on, which is back in the day, people invested in the meeting space physically, the table and the chairs, because at that time, the clients and the prospects were coming in for the meeting. Well, we're living in the future. Like, now is the time to switch that investment to the technology, because these things are going to become more and more and more the hybrid.
Yeah, and the ability to reduce the amount of travel time too is huge. I mean, even a client that's just a couple hours away that I'm going to meet with, and that's 4 hours round trip, an hour to two for the meeting, that wipes out most of your day. So being able to condense that to just an hour and a half of a virtual meeting, and then you've still got all that time back to work on your other stuff, that's really big.
What's a little bit of an offshoot, but what's kind of beautiful about all of this is that, we didn't think like this back a year ago. It was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go drive out to so-and-so and meet with them and talk to them. We're going to have face-to-face, be a good conversation. And yeah, it's going to suck up my day, but that's what we got to do. And you just did it. And now before there was this idea of like, man, if we're not face-to-face, this could go different directions. We really need to be face-to-face. Now it's just everybody's like, I can get 4 hours of my day back. I'm going to make this work. Like we'll use technology and whatever we have to do video and everything. And it's just amazing that the mentality that's changing in customers and employees to really see the productivity and time savings, and realize that any shortcomings in a virtual meeting, a remote meeting, aren't worth the massive savings in time that can be gained by doing it. If you would just say, screw it, let's do it face to face. So anyway,
It's funny too, because like now virtual meetings are so normal. Like the handful of in-person meetings I've had over the last 5 or 6 months, like you walk in, you're like, oh, this feels a little strange now, just being in front of them and not having, your home and your background and all those things. So there's been a pretty big shift.
Yeah, if you had told me a year ago that I would be this excited about a conference room technology, I would have been like, what? But like, I'm literally excited about it because it's such a big part of everyday life now that, and it really does make a difference.
Okay, so let's move into the next topic, which was a workplace by Facebook Q&A that we had with a couple clients that use Workplace. I don't know, John, I don't think you work with the Callaway Bank much, but was there anything that you heard from them that was kind of surprising?
Yeah, it was two things really. It was the impact it's had on their culture, and then the way it's been able to connect, like their leadership team, their executives throughout to all their employees throughout the organization. And that's awesome. That's so valuable for them to be able to interact with everyone inside their organization so easily. Whereas before, it'd be like, okay, well, if we have a full company-wide meeting, yeah, we're all together, but we're not really speaking one-on-one. We don't have that kind of connection. So the ability to bring everyone together is great. The culture impact was really cool to hear about as well, because I definitely feel like we have that same kind of value piece with Workplace within JMARK as well, being able to work within groups and then also with people in other departments that you might not work with very often, but now you're having kind of daily conversations with them.
Yeah, what I thought was pretty interesting with at least the Callaway Bank is that, on the panel, we had two individuals that had a very large generational gap between the two. And the passion between both of them, from an executive and someone on the floor was just, is palpable. And to see the excitement that a communications and collaboration system can cause in an organization. And I've been to their office, and they have multiple offices, but the people in the office that I went to, they're all fairly close. But it's amazing how a tool, I mean, we implemented Workplace long before we went remote. But it's amazing how a tool can have such a huge impact, whether you are seeing your employees face to face, or whether you're seeing your employees over a screen. I mean, it's just helped in so many areas in our organization, and obviously in theirs, and in Spyglass also, to bring their people together. And that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, it really does. It seems, I think it's something that people write off a little bit as being important, but I can tell you, one, as a remote employee, that it has brought me closer to the people I work with at JMARK in a way that would definitely never happen without Workplace. And not just because of the actual collaboration and working, but studies have shown that team building happens in those small conversations. Team building happens when people have a chat over coffee for 10 minutes in the morning, or pass each other in the hall, and Workplace has allowed that to happen for me in a lot of ways, where it's like with people that I don't interact with regularly, even when they're not working. And it makes a difference, so that when I actually do go to Springfield and I walk into the office, it's not a bunch of strangers. It's people that I have already had other conversations and other interactions with. So, it's just like when I run into John, it's like, oh, hey, we can carry on a conversation we might have been having on Workplace just a few days before, rather than, how's it been? There's no awkwardness. And that carries across. I have also worked in the past in places with multiple locations, multiple offices. And, there can be a difference between those offices if there's not, because you're not seeing those people every day, but Workplace also can help bridge that gap. So even if you might just be, on different sides of town, you're still coming together virtually every day.
Yeah, I would say that my biggest takeaway from the Workplace Q&A was that there were representatives from 3 different companies in it, all different sizes, all different industries, their different positions. They use it differently. So this is not something, built specifically for one small niche group of people. You can really take it and cater it exactly to your business.
I think we can talk all day about how Workplace has helped our culture and connectedness and morale and communications and ideation and innovation and adaptation and all these things. But one of the things that Kristen mentioned and Samir talked a little bit about too is velocity. It's hard to put into words and to describe to somebody the speed at which JMARK has ramped up over the last 3 years. The speed at which we're operating because of Workplace. You take just the only way I can really quantify it is, for JMARK, we're taking roughly 10,000 emails a day that have been removed from the system. We're not having these massive amounts of emails going around the organization. These are happening in chats and in groups within Workplace. And that has it's hard to describe. The velocity at which we can get things done is so amazing. And when it comes to a disaster, like we had a flood come through our office a number of years ago. When it comes to an economic recession or everything that's going on now, and with COVID and everything, it has allowed us to just massively adapt without many headaches.
Yeah, it's so versatile too. Like Christina was saying in that roundtable, like everyone talked about how they use it differently. And was it Ryan from the real estate group? Yeah, he talked a lot about how it's improved like their training and just being able to have a central place for all those training aids and materials for new hires to go to. And like we use that at JMARK too. We have training material in there. It's like if we went down the list of like things that we use Workplace for, it'd be like the 7th or 8th thing I thought of. So it's just so versatile. It's so user friendly. I mean, it's instantly familiar to anyone who's used Facebook on the social media side. And with some other communication tools, I think there's a difference there in the training or the familiarization phase.
Yeah, and that's, Todd, you mentioned velocity, and it made me think of this idea that has always intrigued me of Pixar, the animation studio, like 20 years ago or whenever, at some point when they built their new workplace, their new building, they specifically designed it so that there were open areas where people would run into each other with the knowledge and the understanding that decisions would get made, collaboration would happen, and creativity would happen during those times when people would pass each other. And so, with the idea that these are sort of the hubs where people work together and solve things quickly. And in my mind, that's what workplace is for us. It's sort of the hub. It's like the first thing that I open every morning. And whereas, to speak to your velocity theme, Todd, whereas in the past, where if I had a question for you, and just a quick thing like, oh, what do you think about this sentence I'm putting in an ad that we're writing versus this? I might double check my thought and think, is this big enough question to write an email, send it to Todd, wait for his answer? But in workplace, I shoot you that question in the chat and you respond, and the end result becomes so much better because suddenly we've collaborated and solved the problem together versus all of that effort that goes into the old days of sending an email.
It's almost like there's a mutual understanding on the differences in the modes. Like, for example, with chat or with email, you can't just reply real quick without it sounding terse, with just a few words. You have to think, okay, let me write out a sentence, let me add a few words. With workplace, there's almost this understanding, almost like text, where you just want an answer and bam. And sometimes the answer can be in a GIF. Sometimes it can be in a smiley face or something like that. And it's, I mean, we've had conversations between Dax, Christina, and I where it was like we had a conversation using GIFs. It was the weirdest thing ever. And we made decisions. But I don't want people to hear, what people often consider like things with Facebook and stuff. But just to give an example, we had a snafu, well, not really a snafu, but a hiccup during the event with Samir's presentation. And we solved the problem using Workplace. Monday, I was in a meeting with sales, and there was an idea that came out of that meeting out of something that is going on with a prospect. In the meeting, I sent it to Christina. Christina added it to a board for us to talk about. Later in the day, we had a meeting and we added it to a podcast for today that we're recording this afternoon. And that's what I mean by the speed and velocity, because previously it would be, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to throw it over on this Trello board. We'll talk about it in a few weeks when we get to our planning. Now we can just adapt so quickly and make big changes, and communication is just amazingly rapid. And those are just a couple examples where, things have gone from one department to another department to another department, like in seconds, and decisions have been made.
Yeah, I think one other thing that I think is important to bring up at this point, which was mentioned in the Q&A, is we have also put together at JMARK a communication code of conduct, which has helped us just know as a company, okay, this is what you use email for. This is, if someone sends you an email, here's the expected amount of time you have to respond. Use email for these things, use chat for these types of decision making, use phone calls for this, and all of this we've laid out. And you mentioned Todd, you mentioned Todd, sort of the unwritten understanding that we had, but we simply put those things into writing. And so everybody in the company is on the same page about those things. And that's been a huge help for us too, to clear out any of those misunderstandings and make sure that we're all communicating at each other in the same way and on the same level and with the same expectations.
Yeah, and it allows you that kind of real-time feedback. For me, it's important for me to have a good understanding of all of my client base, which can be challenging with a larger client base. And so if I'm going to a meeting with a client and I need to I need a quick update from our projects team on something that they've been working on implementing or something that's still in flight, I can send a quick chat message to one of the people in projects, and then I can see if they've read it. If they haven't, I can go to someone else on the team, or I can just realize I'm not going to have that information for my meeting. But it's kind of that instant information that is so valuable when you're trying to prepare for so many different things.
And it's not just about chat. We've been throwing that out for the last few minutes, but workplaces, if you think of it's not Facebook, but if you think of the function of a group in Facebook, you have these multiple groups within a company. You may have a marketing group in Facebook, you may have a sales group in Facebook, and the beauty of these things is that communication can be proliferated throughout. We have times when every day something is posted in an all company group about somebody's birthday that we can all celebrate and recognize. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known about it, or it would have been another email sitting in our inbox. We can, on the marketing, we throw out the campaigns that are going out to clients or prospects, and that informs the CRMs. It informs sales, so they know what things are going out. There's just things happening with security. There's things happening with productization, and all these things are just all in play in all of these different groups throughout the company. And it's not just the notification of or the broadcast part of it, but it's the knowledge sharing, and it's the collaboration that happens because of that, and the increased just understanding and knowledge in the organization, and that's why it's so hard to describe this, or describe it in terms of velocity, because it's all of these things swirling around, making you go fast. So let's, why don't we talk about the final presentation of the day, when Tom kind of brought it home. What were some of the thoughts that each of you had on Tom's presentation? Some of the insights.
So I think I actually happened to open up his presentation here, and I had it ready. And one of the things that really jumped out at me, it jumped out at me the other day, but it jumped out at me again here, is just a simple statement that he made, that he has in his presentation. We've already touched on this, but I think it's so important to underline this. Once things shift, they don't unshift. These changes that we have gone through this year, they're not going away. We're not going to backpedal. And at this point, we're moving forward, and I think it's exciting. I think, Todd, you mentioned the making 10 years worth of changes in just a few months. And to me, I love it, because a lot of these things have been sort of like floating around, video conferencing, that sort of stuff, but suddenly we're using it and it's happening. And I think it's so great. And I think, to me, I just see so many possibilities for organizations to take advantage of these things and do such cool things with their workforce, with their employees, but also with how they work and communicate with their customers as well.
Yeah, I love that too. If everything would have been a few weeks long and everything gone back to normal in April, there may have been a little bit of change, but we're dealing with just the fundamental behavioral change of people, and you don't change that quickly. That's why digital transformation has taken so long. I mentioned, I think in the presentation, I talked about digital transformation back in 2018 at JBits. And I almost didn't do it because it's like, man, this is kind of an old topic. But the reason why it's taken so long is that people's behavior wasn't changing. They wanted to have the face-to-face meetings. They wanted to do things the traditional way. And now we're in a situation where people have been forced to make a change, and they've kind of liked it in some respects. Not all of it, but in some respects. And that is, it's so true. I mean, things will change and go back to a different kind of normal, but they're not going to shift back to just the exact way it was. And that's, kind of the point of the entire symposium. That's why all of these solutions and strategies and tools and tactics were brought out, because change has happened.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got this nudge from COVID to embrace change because change can be scary and uncomfortable. Yeah, I mean, it was necessary because change can be difficult to kind of fully give into. But now that we've had to, it's like we just embrace it now. I mean, the purpose of technology is to make us more efficient and make things easier. And so we have all these tools. We've gotten the nudge to make these changes, and now we just have to continue to embrace it and realize that more changes are down the road too.
I think my biggest takeaway from Tom's presentation was, it's not surprising for anyone who knows Tom, but culture. He's very big on culture, and he had a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk which says, "Company culture is the backbone of any successful organization." And then Tom even went on to say, to not have a culture strategy is like not having a sales strategy. And all of these things that we're talking about play into our company culture 100%.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting, I think, is we've implemented these tools at JMARK, like Workplace, and, developed this Connexus product, and, done things with our telecom system to solve a problem. And there were times when the problem was related to culture, but a lot of the time it was a different type of problem we were trying to solve, but culture was affected. And I think that's the cool thing about it, is we didn't see a negative in our culture from the technology that was implemented. We saw a positive and a positive change towards more connectedness, more communication, more fun, a better culture. And I think a lot of people, business leaders who've read a lot about culture in books and from experts, and, it's drilled into you, it's this soft kind of mushy thing that there are different ways to affect. But I'm not sure I've read any culture book. Just thinking back, this is the first time I thought about this, and there's a number of culture books up there on that bookshelf. I'm not sure I've read a single one that mentioned any piece of technology. And technology has played such a massive impact on our culture.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think companies need to understand that. Like, that is where we're at. And I was looking at another slide of Tom's, and he talks about feedback from new hires and employee retention. And these things are going to matter. The technology that you have at your company that allows your employees to get their work done, that breaks down these barriers between other people, that increases their own velocity. Todd, you talked about the velocity of the company, but we all want to increase the velocity of our own work too, because it brings us our own benefits. And people want this culture. People know, and people hear about the companies and the culture that they have. I brag to my friends all the time when I hear them talking about their work situations and what it's like there, and I compare that to JMARK and the culture that we have, and it makes a difference. And I tell them, and I'm sure that you guys do the same thing, and word gets out, and the best people want to work for the companies that are giving them all of these things. And it really is, at the end of it, a competitive advantage, because you were able to get the better people and you were able to retain those employees. And that, again, adds to this velocity of the stuff that you can get done with your company.
Yeah, everyone's going to be frustrated if they don't have the tools or they're not set up to be successful. When you provide all of that, and everyone does have what they need to be successful, happy workplace.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that well, I was thinking about this morning was this idea of coming up with strategies and coming up with tactics to solve business problems. And one thing that kind of occurred to me, and I hadn't really thought about too much, is that, there's so much that influences that. There is so much we don't know in the world that can influence solutions to fix our problems. And that is the entire reason we put on the symposium, is because, we have used technology to solve some very critical problems in our organization, and they've had massive impacts in our organization. And we wanted to share this information with other companies, because if you're a manufacturer or a bank, you're in your sphere of existence, your world, and a lot of times you try brainstorming on ideas to fix a problem, a communications problem or whatnot, and technology isn't necessarily in that ballpark. If you don't know that there's an application that solves this problem, or a piece of software that solves this problem, or a way to use technology differently to solve a certain problem, you can't come up with that idea. And that's essentially why we put on the symposium, is to, share these ideas with others, and why we're inviting everybody to sit down with us to do a strategy session. If you head over to jmark.com/startnow, jmark.com/startnow, you can sign up to have just a quick strategy session where we can talk through, what are some of the challenges that you're dealing with because of all of the changes that are happening in the world, and what are some solutions that we might be able to bring to the table. It's not meant as a pushy sales presentation. It's meant as a neighbor helping a neighbor, and we value ourselves, or we value being able to provide that assistance and be able to provide that knowledge that we've gained through this time. And so with that, we will say adieu. Take care.
Thank you for attending this podcast. We hope it has been informative and helped convey that at JMARK, we are people first and technology second. To learn more and discover additional content relevant to your business, please visit us online at jmark.com or at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You may also call us at 844-44-JMARK. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again.